Okay, we saw that in the Mishnah on Daf Mem Tesam Beis, there are various tumis that go ahead and require a nazir to go ahead and end this naziris and go ahead and start anew, right? Start anew. One of them was Malei Tavid Rakov, which was a shovelful watt of corpse dust. And we said yesterday, Machloikis, we ended up with basically a two-way Machloikis. Does it mean just Pisas Yad, or does it mean Malei Chafnav, the full thing, that amount? Now, what exactly is Rakov is the topic of our first part of the daf. What exactly is Rakov? What exactly is what the art scroll calls corpse dust? Who's the mace that has Rakov? Notice every mace has Rakov, meaning every mace disintegrates and the bones become dust, but meaning which are the ones that have a din of Rakov? Oh, it's a hard daf because somebody else. It's a right. It's a hard daf. This person only comes in a hard daf. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but that's not, then it'd be lashon hara. So now,
initials?
What?
Initials?
Not initials.
American League Nationals?
AR.
Okay. Okay. Anyway. So when it says Rakov, you have corpse dust, guys. Of course, you have corpse dust. The question is which one has the halacha l'moishmi Sinai that it's metama, right? What the halachic Rakov that goes ahead is metama. Again, you don't need a definition to what Rakov is. I'll tell you what Rakov is. It's disintegrated bones. But which ones have the halacha that will be metama the nazir? Okay. So says the Gemara, a mace shenikva orum. First of all, he had to be buried without any tachrichin. Why? Because when it disintegrates, you can't have mixed in anything else besides Rakov. But Oren Shel Shayish, he had to be buried in a marble coffin. Would like to carry that. Meaning because if it would be a wooden coffin, the wood disintegrates also, and you'd have the same problem of a mixture in with the mace. Oyal Gabe Ritzpa Shel Avonim, or if not that, or a Ritzpa of Avonim, stones which don't want to disintegrate. That's a Meshiesh Rakov. I looked up the Tosefta. This is not the words of the Tosefta, or else it's kind of repetitious. In other words, why repeat? You started off this, which is the mace that this is in a Rakov. They give examples, and then you conclude this is the mace that in a Rakov. You're talking about a Tosefta, right? So you don't repeat itself. So this tak is lashon of the Gemara. Again, it's a Meshunatik Masechta, guys. The normal state way of Babylonian talk that we're used to after doing this for almost 30 years, right? And some a little less, but nonetheless, we get used to a certain style, and this stylistically doesn't work. It was not. Nikvar biksusai, however, if he's buried in his clothing, ba'arin shel eitz, or an aron of wood, oyal gabe ritzpa shel levonim, which is bricks, which I guess do disintegrate. So meishein la rakov, that's a mace that doesn't have dinner rakov, and that's why you said that lashon. Okay, so that's the status of rakov. Again, it can't have anything mixed in. Amaula. In other words, it had to be from a mace that had all these three things. It had to have meat, it had to have sinus, and it had to have what? Atzames. It has to be mikulam. Esrei Rav rekev haba min basar tahar. Rekev that comes from basar would be tahar. Hamina etzem tamei. What's the inference? If it's dust from etzem, it would be tamei. In other words, if you know that the person had a bone, and that was only the bone was separate, then what? That would not be, if that mashma, it would be rakov, it would be tamei, correct? So you see that what? You don't need the whole kit and caboodle. You don't need, three. Even one will do. Even an etzem alone will go ahead and create the din of rakov. Forgot the lekabasa, and for the Gemara, no, Ulu will answer, Emahachi, read it this way. Rekav abba min abasa tahar. It's tar, when? At sheyesh etzem bebasar. Until you have an etzem. The bus, it's tar. There's no din of rakov by basar. Because there is no rakov by basar. It'll disintegrate. But it's tahar until there's what? Bone. Throw a bone into the mix, right? Excuse the pun. Throw a bone into the mix, and thus you get rakov. I read the Gemara, there was three things. 1 second, aleka gidim. You don't have sinus. Says Gemara, efshel basar lat samais below gidim. It's not possible to have basar at summers without gidim. It's very interesting. Just for a yediyah, we use the word aver, and we teach it limb. And I would tell you there are 248 avarim in the body. There doesn't seem to be 248 limbs in the body. Halachically, aver is anything that has these three components: basar, atzames, and gidin. That creates the word aver. Those three things. So basically, you need an aver for rakav. That's what you need. You need an aver for rakav. Now, whether it's a din of a din of rakav in an independent aver, we'll see in this Gemara. But you need those three components. That's Ula's thing. So in other words, that's traditional three components of an aver are those three things. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnei Mesim shekavim zeh im zeh. You have two mesim that are buried together. So when they decompose, what do you have? A mixture. Nase gilgalin zeh lezeh. Now the Mefarshim they're trying very hard to figure out the word gilgalin, but what it means is they're kind of like adversaries. They kind of it's a mixture, and that mixture, as we saw earlier, you can't have eights, you can't have clothing. That would go ahead, despite the fact that they're both decomposed corpse. Nonetheless, vis-a-vis each other, they're not naturally together, and thus it would be what? Conversely, guys, if you would have two mesons separate, and they decompose separately, and then got mixed together, that would be rakav, because they got that status independently. The din of creating of rakav means in its creation, it can't have something decomposed with it. But once it gets the status of rakav, then it will not be problematic. And which is the next piece of Gemara. The Gemara is going to ask. So again, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnei Mesim shekavim zeh im zeh, Nasa gilgalin zeh lezeh. They become kind of adverse mixtures to each other. Masiv Rav, I think we have to change the girsa. Masiv Rav Nasim Rav Oishia, right? Rekiv habami beis mesim tamei. A rekiv that comes from two corpses are tamei. So how can you tell me that if they're buried together, they're not? Says Gemara Rav, it's pasha, like I told you. Shekavu zeb if the each one was what? Was buried independently. And each one therefore decomposed independently and only got mixed afterwards, as opposed to the case of Rav Nassim is the case where they were buried together like in a mass grave, right? They were buried together, and so nobody no rakav in a mass grave. So I stopped it short. The seventh Kiva when they rotted, they decayed. And together and the chiddush is that they added up to the share of Mali Tavid Rakam. Amar Rabbi Rav Chan Rabbi Yochanan. Again, guys, most of the share tonight is discussing different variables with different questions about Rakam, exactly how it works, different things, how Rakam works. Dover up to Daf Nun Aleph Amid Aleph in Masechta Nazir.
When do we start in
Anyway, and by the way, you need a haircut. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, guys, it's alright. Guys, it's alright. You go ahead and you cut the hair, the cover imay, and then you consequently bury the hair with him. So now decomposing what is the body with separate hair. So nasa loy galgalin, it'll become that adversarial mixture to go ahead and take the din of rakav off. So it's mashma that here is an independent thing, and therefore what it would. But that's only if it's guys cut off. What happens if the person dies with it? Then it would be part of the person. So it'd be part of the person. Yes, once you cut it off, it's a different thing. Now, Tanan Hassam, we learn over there in Masechta Oilers. Kol shebe meis tamei, every part of a meis is tamei, chutz min hashinayim, with the exception of the tooth. You remember we had this, guys? The tooth. We said Rabbi Yochanan used to carry around. He buried 10 sons, and he carried around a bone of his 10th son, and the question is, how can he go ahead and carry that around if it's tamei? So one of the answers is it's Harold, less than a sora, and another one it's a tooth. So his tooth wasn't tamei. That was. There's another teretz. Okay. Anyway. Okay. The Lisbon. The Asayah here. Vatziparin and nails. These are not tamei, right? Ubishas chiburin kulin tamein. And when they're what? They're attached in the tamei. So this is not a steer to what we just said, right? No, this is independent. When do we say that it's an gilgilin, it's an adverse mixture? That's only when it's cut off. When it's cut off and now has a din of sayer. When it's attached, it has a din of the person themselves. Boy chizkiya. So a person needs a haircut, right? So the sore is there to be cut off. The person needs a manicure, right? He needs his nails cut. Dummy. Do you view them as gazos? And then if a person would be buried with long hair and long fingernails, there would not be a din of rakav. At this time when it's buried, they're connected and they would be part of the person and would not be a din of rakav. Good shaila, right? How do you view it? Let's be poishif from Rabbi Rav Chana, who said above, if you cut it off, then it's considered independent. Mashma only when you cut it off, not when it's roy to be cut off. Again, Rabbi Bar Chana said above, if you cut off the hair and bury it, it would go ahead and make it nishkain rakov, right? Mashma, you have to cut it off. So let's nifshalei mid the Rabbi Bar Chana. Taima, the reason why it's an independent entity and makes gilgilin is mishum the gazes, because you cut it off. Haloi gazes, but if you didn't cut it off, loy, maybe not. So therefore, let's be parsha that a seir oimeli gazes is lavki gazes dummy. So that's when hachi gamar gazes harizeh galgalin. If you cut it off, it's galgalin. Loy gazes mi boile, but loy gazes is shaila. In other words, you can't. There's three madregas. There's normally attached that doesn't have to be cut. There's cut, and then that's attached that has to be cut. So the two extremes, the one where it's normal and it doesn't have to be cut, that's part of the mace. Where it's cut off, independent. Where it has to be cut but not cut yet, then that's a shaila. So you can't be paishit from Rabbi Bar Chana. You can't be paishit. That would be the shaila. Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah, another shaila. Rakav abba mina akev. Now, this is for the podiatrist among us, but he's not here anymore, right? That we used to have a person share Dr. Ben, for those people who don't remember him. Anyway, he was a podiatrist and he is a podiatrist. So what's the shaila of akev? Guys, what is unique about the heel? Right, so you take a look at Taisus. Rakav abba mina akev mahu. Lefi sheba akev shaladam. You have thick skin, you have dead skin, and your calluses, you have calluses by your heels. So we want to know, is that if a person dies, obviously the skin is going to be considered part of him. I mean that's a pasha. Do we view it like a separate entity, like a hair that's cut off? Well, fart, it's still connected to him. It's a good shaila. Like how do you view what? How do you view that zehu? That's exactly what it is. It's dead skin, right? Let me just say it. Aval the asim in akev loy. Says the Gemara. I just skipped. Boy Rav Yirmiyah. Rekav abba min akev mal. Ki garmina and rakav. When do we have again? Garmina means halacha mesh b'sina, guys. Haba mikula mace. That's when it comes from what? From the whole mace. Aval the asim in akev loy. It makes no difference, right? In other words, kula mace means bucket has life to it. Busted has life to it, and since the akev does not have life to it, then it would be considered. It would be an impediment. It would be gilgilin. Or do we say no? Do we say it's connected to the person and it's a loch of regular skin, even though it's dead skin, and it would not impede what the loch of rakav? That's the shaila. Again, very interesting. You have a loch of Sinai, and the loch of Sinai is. To what extent do we say the halacha ma'ash b'sinai? That's the question of the Gemara. It seems to be very logical. Okay, so again, what's the two sudden to the shaila? Do we say since it's dead skin, it's separate like here, and it would be a gilgilin and it would be an adverse mixture? Or do we say no? Do we say it's attached to the guy and therefore what? It'll be rakav. Hashma, the Tani Reb Nosson Reb Aishia, rakav abba mishnei mesim, a rakav that comes to two mesim, what is what is tamei. Right? Loi, And if you could tell me abomina okev not, still hacha dilma derech okev kasi, hacha dilma derech of kasi. Pirish. Guys, why don't we say if you're worried about Mason and okev would be a problem, why aren't you worried from, the other guy, maybe there's some okev over there. I don't know why he has to say the shiloh by two people, or even by one person, right? Even by one person, but I guess that really is the shiloh by one person, right? Okay, look at Taisus. Rakav abba mishnei mason tame. Ule elok mirat rava kigoyim. Sho'aymin al moli tarvid. You have, how much do you have? You have a shovelful. Shleinisha mishneiim. You only have left over from them. Kim moli tarvid. You only have a shovelful left over from both mason. Visal kedai dechabomina okev loy kloimar she'enim etama, that it's not going to be metama. Zil hacha dilma derech okev kasi kloimar shemi yesh by mina okev. Maybe from one of the mason you have dead skin, but from the heel. Maybe the osh is the worms that eat up the body. And the rakav remain from the rest of the body. So again, that's the Gemara. The Gemara is asking. I don't know what they asked by one, but this is they brought in this case over here. Okay. The Gemara says, the Gemara answers, eat the erka of kule mace because he derech hakanami. In other words, if the whole body decays, and the akiv is among them, there's no shaila that's matama, guys. There's no shaila. Hakanami. Alahacha, what's the shaila over here? Going the erkiv chad aver because he derech akiv. My teku. In other words, you have one aver that it's disconnected, and that aver became dust, and in that, let's say the foot that's connected to it, that became dust, and mixed in is the aver, and then you have that shiloh. And why would that be a shiloh? The Russ says because maybe, I don't know how this works out, maybe like gangrene, maybe doc, that it's the okev, the skin of the okev that's causing the decomposition of the bone, and therefore that would not be natural. That's the way the Rush learns the shiloh. In other words, why would the shiloh be if you have a bone and then you have the dead skin, right? So it's mashma the following: if you have a full-fledged corpse, there's no shiloh that is rakav, despite the fact that there is dead skin from the heel onto the corpse. That's no shiloh. The shiloh is it begins decaying. Let's say the foot area, and becomes, the bone becomes decayed. The shiloh is it decaying because of the okev? Then it would not be, or not. That's the way the shiloh is learned, and therefore remains teku. Look at the lashon of the rush, guys. I have in the last line over here. It's v'ka'asi derech okev. Shadayin li nirkev sharaguf. The rest of the body has not decomposed. Kiyama okev. Only that area. V'oisei evra samach okev, and the ankle or the foot that's samach to the okev. V'iklam eimar lefi shein chiyas ba'okev. Since there's no life to the okev, mir lirkoiv. It hastened to rot. Here give gamma ava sheetzle, maybe like gangrene, something like that, and it made what the gang green, like it's going to go ahead and cause a little rotting over there. See, guys, that seems to be the shayla. The Gemara says take it. Huh? Yeah. Okay, just cover Yehuda. Listen, one day we can have one happy day. Reality was said long enough. Are you happy for me, Dr. Press? Then I'm happy. Okay. Anyway,
You landed Aaron Rodgers.
Shragi, the only time I want to hear from you is learning. I don't want to hear in Batala from you. Okay. And it's not Aaron Rodgers, it's Aaron Rodgers. Okay. I'm changing it to Aharon. Okay, says the Gemara right. Why Rabbi Yemia? Uber b'mei isha. A woman dies and she's pregnant, and now they decompose. Havi Gagolim, is that an adverse mixture? Oiloi. Right? Right. Kivin the Amamar, Uber Yerech Imai. Since we say that the Uber is considered literally the thigh of the mother, that they're one entity, Hilkach Gufahu, it's considered part of the body, so it's not considered like two Mason being buried together. Guys, right? It's not considered two Mason buried together. And therefore it's not this adverse mixture. Like Dilma, Kivin the Seifu Lot says, since in the end this child is going to come out, Mifrash Parish Mina, it's considered what? A separate entity. And it's like two Mason. And it's two like Mason, then what? Then it's not Rakov. Right? The Imtim Saloimar, Uber the Seifer Lot says Mifrash Parish Mina. Guys, what about the following? What if you're going to say the Uber that's going to leave is considered a separate entity, it's like two Mason, it's not Rakov. Shichva Zera b'me'ishamahu. Why would it then be by Shichva Zera? Look at the Mefarish, what's called Rashi. Shichva Zera b'me'ishamahu kigoin shemesa shahoisa basbanim. She died, she had children. The stam isha basbanim islay Shichva Zera b'me'ah. Stam isha basbanim has Shichva Zera in her womb. Oy shenivala samech misasa that she had relations before she died. So you know there's inside her Shichva Zera. Mi'amrinan says back in the Gemara, even the law is yatzer, since why nothing is formed yet, that hasn't formed yet, then kigufa dani. I don't know, even the ma'al makasi, since it's what? It's a foreign object, lie. What's the shaila? Again, the Gemara doesn't, not place of the shaila. Boy Rav Papa, Pir Shemahu. What about perish? And what about his excrement? Kivin le mekaima. Since you can't live without it because you have to eat, it's considered part of your life, and therefore it's part of the woman, and therefore it doesn't share the rakov. And then it would share the rakov. It would be like a separate entity. Boy Ravacha berei the Ravika. Oiramahu. What about skin? Now it's interesting. We had a shaila. We had a shaila about hair. This is the shaila about skin, meaning. Says the Gemara, Boy Rav Huna bar Menoyach, Kichui b'nihuma. What about spittle or mucus? Would that be a foreign object and shterokov? So I'm going to Shmuel bar Achel Rapapa. Bisak daitach kohani the kama have a gigilin. If you can tell me all these things, in fact, what are considered adverse mixture, rekev the mitama hechim mishkachasla. How do you ever have a case of what a rekev that what is mitama? What? But 1 second. There's a way. If there's the will, there's a way. One. You want to know why he doesn't come to share? Says the word. The Shakya made the kolim. You gave him to drink water from palm trees. Right? It seemed Rashi Taisus brings the Gemara in Shemana Shratzim that there was a decal, there was water that would come between the column. It seemed to be a diuretic. You want to be cleansed out, that was that cleansed it out. That was the
night before.
Yes, that's what they used before Dusalax. Right? Okay, now the Sachya Nasha, and they would do with the pilatory on the hair, the Shulka be made Tveria, and then they could take the mace and put it into Veit Tveria, and that would take care of the skin. So in other words, I could take care of all the problems. Now, why do you have to take off the hair? If the whole shaila before was oimid ligzais, but when it's on you, it's part of the body. So obviously, this brisa, this opinion disagrees with that previous Gemara. Basically, the hair you're never going to have a case of rakav. We never have a case of rakav because we don't bury. First of all, you bury with tachrichin. Second of all, you bury in with wood. And also this. The Rambam doesn't bring down any of these things. He doesn't bring down if you take the body and you put a depilatory on it and you give it a laxative to clean it out and you put it in the Meitfer, he doesn't bring it because he holds like the kasha of Shmuel bar Acha, right? They said, how can you ever have it? You can't have it. It's not normal. So obviously, this must be considered part of the person. There's
what 20,000 bodies that decomposed. That was a whole issue in the area. Where was it? time of the second base Migdash. No?
Beitar.
Beitar.
Yeah.
So those bodies were all
Intact.
intact.
They were
Yeah,
intact. Yeah,
They
they
didn't
were
decompose.
intact. They didn't decompose.
They did decompose.
What about say? But you have, let's say, these mass graves, right?
Right.
These mass graves that they won't be in a rock off because it's more than one. First of
That's what
actually, they did bury them naked. They did,
Right. It was in the
but it's in
ground.
the ground. It's in the ground, but yeah,
There's
it's,
nothing on them.
yes.
There's no hair, there's nothing on
No,
them.
there's nothing on them. What about cremation?
We did that.
Okay, so we're going to see it's Gemara. We're going to see it. We're going to see it's a Gemara. But cremation is not. You said it's not matama. It's matama. It's not. That it loses. But it loses its shame. It loses its shame. Okay. So I think this could be the Gemara. Okay. Amar Abaya naktinon. Okay. Gemara in Kitten says, guys, anytime naktinon says Messiah, that's what it means. The Messiah. Naktinon is a Messiah. Mace shetachnoi, a mace that you ground up, meaning you changed the tsura of the bone. It did not go ahead and decompose naturally, or crematorium, the same thing. Right? It's you changed the mitzias, right? You didn't decompose naturally. You got the dust, but you didn't get it in a way of the natural way. So it was ground up. Ein le raka. There's no din of raka. There's no din of raka over there. Maybe this probably is the Gemara Chaim. This would be, but that would be din of rokov, not necessarily. Rokov is that maybe mithamatumis mace. Doing a bit of a rokov that to go ahead and be seiser in the ziris. Again, there's different dragas. I told you there's a tumis mace that's not seiser in the ziris. So I'm not sure you can make the diak I'm making from here. Okay, iboilahu tachnoi. If you ground it up, the chazar v'hirkiv, and then it rotted. Mahu. In other words, it became. After you ground it up, it became natural. So this would not have to do with cremation, because cremation it's mamish efer. So now midi says the Gemara midu taima that has a din of gilgalin ella the ikka basa v'ginim at samais the ikka. What makes rakov is those three entities. Ula said you need those three things. You have them. They were in a ground form, then they decomposed, and now you have it. By Dilma, you need them to be naturally to be decomposed rather than not naturally because it was ground up. And the Gemara says, Teku. Pani Ulu Bar Chanina, mace shechasar, a mace that is missing, ein loy rakov, does not have a din of rakov. One, the loy tfusa, there's no din of tfusa. Tfusa, fellas, is, we're going to see that later on in the Masechta, is you find a mace in the derech and you want to go ahead and move him, you have to take all the loose earth that is around him that he's buried with, and 3 etzbois of what's called psula ground, the ground that had been dug below. So he has a din of, he does not have a din of tfusa. The loy shchunas kavrois, if you find a mace, and within another proximity, we're going to see that later on, that has a din of a cemetery. So then you have to be chayish for all around. That does not apply to what? To a mace that's buried a chaser. Now, very nice. I saw a very nice diak. Missing a limb. So look at Taisus, guys. Look at Taisus. I'll show you a beautiful diak. It says mace shechaser ain by recovering. It does not have a din of rotting. He says rotting. Okay. Shenikbar chaser, that it was buried chaser. So there's the Radzina Rebbe wrote a sefer called Sidrei Taira. Radzina Rebbe is known for the tzitzis, the blue. He was on the cuttlefish tchelis. The tchelis that you have is from Rav Herzog. That's the Murex trunculus, right? But again, this is so. What is if you? He makes the following dig. Nikva chaser, meaning you buried him chaser. What happens if he was missing the limb, the amputee, and you buried him with the limb? Mashma mufi chaser. Yeah, nikva chasa, the diya guys. You buried him, guys. You hear this diya guys. You buried him chasa when he was missing. What happens if you buried him, but he wasn't chasa because the limb, the amputated limb, you put in with him? Yeah,
that's what they do. If someone has
I know the question is regarding this halacha that you just said. This halacha you just said that the halacha that nikva chasa that it does not have a din of rakav. That would only be if you bury without the limb. But even though the limb is disattached, if you bury him with the limb, it would be. That's what the sage retire wants the mima diet. Okay,
Out by Klura, they did that. They actually put it in the limb after they buried it, while they buried him.
Yeah. Okay. What? Yeah, but what do they do? I guess you keep in the freezer for it. What do you do?
No, the limb, they bury the limb.
Yeah.
And they unburied and buried with the person they found.
They bury it somewhere and they know where it's buried? That's what they do.
That's what they do. That's what they do.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, you can't keep it around because it's matama. It's like you can't have. My daughter brought home, it was a big shiloh. I made keep it in the garage. She was in medical school, and she was a whole skeleton. Skeletons. So you had this. You had the goylus. You had the shidra. You had the whole kit and caboodle.
Whoa.
So what?
He sure it was there.
He was smoking. Zevi's house. It was in Zevi's house. Okay. Anyway, so it's chassid. Now we're gonna ask on this, guys. We're gonna ask on this. Okay. Now, a little background over here. You're picking it up in the middle of a conversation. It's a Mishnah Idyos. So let's see Taisvis that will go ahead and lead us into what's going on over here. The Taisvis is Meisivei. Loyim Amit b'Mesech. Now Mesech Idyos. Tanan. The iflugal kazayis basar, you have a kazayis of meat. Haparish min eva min achai. Fellas, an eva min achai would be mitama. In other words, the scenario that Dov just gave, the person's alive, he lost a limb, that limb would be mitama. You have to bury it. Good. What happens if basar leaves that limb? What happens if basar leaves that limb? Is it mitama? Now, let's say the limb was from a mace. The basa from the mace would be mitama, correct? So can you learn out basar of aver min achai from basar aver min mace? That's the shiloh we're picking up in the middle. Okay, so one more time. We're trying to figure out. You have a aver min achai. That aver, and again, what's an aver? You already know, guys. I told you at the beginning of share. It's basar, atzamais, and gidim. Those three things. Now if it's a mace, and the basa separates from the aver min mace, it's tamei. So can you learn out, just like the basa separated from an aver of a mace is tamei, so too the basa separated from the aver of the chai is tamei. So that's where we're picking it up in the middle of that conversation. So now back in the Gemara. And the Gemara is saying you can't learn out basa min achai from basa min mace. You can't learn out basa aver min achai from basa aver min mace for the following reason. Loyim amit b'mace sheyesh le roiv. You have the din of roiv minyanoi, the majority of bones 125. The roiva and the roiva kav, or mali tarvid rakov. All these will be tam tumis oil. Taima bechai. What are you going to say by avim and achai? Shein loy roiv. There's no din of roiv, no application whatsoever. The loy roiva, nor din of a cutter of a kav. Loy mali tarvid rakov. So in other words, you can't. It's not comparable. It's not comparable, guys, to learn. Or possible to learn basa min achai from basa min mace because it's more chomer. Now, what heichi dami? Now we're speaking about mali tavid rakov. Good. So now it must mean that you want to learn out disintegrated chai from disintegrated mace. But 1 second, the mace would be chassid then, wouldn't it? And nonetheless, it's tamei. That's the kasha. Heichi dami. This that you want to say the rock of that it's rock of aver min achai. The arkiv chad aver, that one aver became what? Rekev. So you want to know, is it possible in one to be aver to be rock of? The kavase gabe mace. What would be the parallel be by a mace? Afilu chad aver, ikar rakov. So even one aver there would be a din of rakov. So what do you see? That even though the mace is chaser, there would be a din of rakov. Says the Mikatani. Mace. No, why do you think it's a parallel case? It's tit for tat. No. Hakamashmalan. Shum mace. That by mace it's shayich roiv, by mace it's shayiv roiva, by mace it's shayiv rakov. Yesh le rakov. Shum chay ein le rakov. So it doesn't mean the parallel case. It means the genre. In the genre of mace, you find the concept of of Rakov, but you don't find it. But it's not that a parallel case, an aver of a chai, an aver in a mace, and it's speaking where the aver of the mace is Rakov, and then you want to disprove the what that a chaser is what would be the din of Rakov. It means that the shum mace in the genre of mace, same kash. Boy Rava. Here give kishu chai the chaser mace. Okay, the guy has a limb. The limb decomposed, and then he consequently died. Good. So, what's the shaila? Mahu ki gemiri Rakov. When do we have the Messiah guys? Halacha Mishmina Rakov, the Erkiv Kashu Mace. That's what when he dies completely. No, the Erkiv Kashu Mace. In other words, guys, it has to be that it totally decomposed when he was dead, but this limb decomposed first before he died. And therefore there won't be a din of Rakov. Well, the bottom line is they're all dead, right? Right. That's the shaila. One more time. Boy, Rava, here give Kishu Chai. The limb was that it became it rotted out and decomposed, and he was alive. Then v'chazer u'meis. Consequently, he died, and then he decomposed completely. Mahu ki gemiri Rakov. When we have a Messiah, Allah Chamash Sinai of Rakov, the Erkiv Kishu Meis. It's dafka when it rots when he's dead, and the first part rotted when he was alive. Like Dilma Hashtami Amais. The bottom line is it's all dead, and therefore there would be din of Rakov. Tashma, the same thing. You can't learn out basim and achai from basim and ames. Why? Because by mace you have the chumra of roiv minyanoi, roiv and roiv akav. Umali tavet Rakov. Taima b'chai. Right. Taima. The reason. Right, the reason the whole time he's alive, the time Mishum Chai, Taisa says Pirish, calls man shu Chai ein le Rakov. Aval meish yesh le Rakov. Ki goyin meis adam echad shenirkav b'oid Chai. A person dies and he had part of him that rotted when he was alive. Echem evarov yesh le Rakov loisa ever. Afal pi shehirkav b'oid Chai. In other words, Taima, back in the Mar, we want to prove that there would be din of Rakov. Taima Mishum Chai. The reason why there's no din of Rakov because he's alive. Hames, if he would die, Yeshle Rakov. Right? Says the Gemara, now, Mikatani Hames. Are we speaking about where it decomposed when he was alive and then he died? No. Hakamash Malan. The Shum Mesh Yeshle, meaning there's a din Rakov, there's a din of Rakov by the genre of Mace. Shum Chai, but alive ain't like Rakov. Again, you want to be punished the same way. You wanted to say it's speaking where it first decomposed, and then it decomposed when he was alive, and then died. And so you see there's a din of Rakov. And the answer is no, it's not speaking that case at all. It's speaking where the Chai was Chai, and the Rakov took place when he was dead. And it's speaking that you don't find Rakov in the genre of Chai, you do find Rakov in the genre of Mace. And we'll stop over here.